These are the metaphysical teachings of P. L. Swan.
Hey, it's PL, and in this video I'd like to talk about a few things focusing on the individuality of a spiritual journey. I think that it's really important to anyone who, is thinking about spiritual things, who is interested in spiritual awakening, a journey of awakening to their true self, understands the freedom to move toward self-awareness and awakening in an individual way. I think there are a lot of prejudices in some spiritual communities or religious traditions about various behaviors and ideas. And this can be harmful and restrictive depending upon the individual journey. But yeah, I think in general it's important to realize that your spiritual journey can look very different than that of anyone else. I like to talk about it as directions. Someone can be going through a lot of things that might not seem spiritual in a cliched sense. They might be playing video games all day in their room, or looking at pornography, or going clubbing, or doing drugs, or drinking a lot. And it might not look spiritual to someone else, but really it just depends on the direction of that person's deeper intention and sort of their own spiritual yearning that will determine where that leads in the end. If someone is leading life that appears to be, upstanding or ethical, or someone is going to church, or someone has a meditation practice, or does yoga or something like this, but their deeper intention is simply focused on their, ego experience and human experience, and they're not actually seeking something deeper, then that quote-unquote spiritual life isn't going to go anywhere, because their direction isn't moving, it's not deepening. It's the same, so I like to look at it sometimes in terms of psychology, about someone who's, broken and messed up, or someone who's psychologically healthy. You can't really judge people for where they're at unless you really know the full story in the direction that they're going in. If they began in a place of incredible brokenness and injury, but they're moving toward healing and self-awareness, then they are far more spiritual than someone who might have been given a lot of, opportunity, a loving family, some good teachings, but they're doing nothing with it. They're just, living a simple, selfish life. And their little practice, their yoga practice, or their, going to church or whatever, is just a part of that. They're not deepening, they're not broadening, they're not actually awakening. And so I think the most important thing is that we have a yearning for truth, for what is real. That something in us just desires real authenticity. That, what we might look like, what our life looks like, what others look like, what things look like on the surface, that's just not what's as important to us as what actually exists in a deeper and broader sense. And, different experiences can lead into that ongoing deeper desire for authenticity. I traveled a lot when I was younger. I just wandered. I went to Amsterdam, worked in a youth hostel and a bar, drank a lot, went to the red light district, had some experiences there, smoked a lot of weed, sitting in cafes, looking at the water, contemplating life, feeling, seeking some deeper feeling of life. And sometimes someone, say, spending hours playing video games, if they actually have a yearning for something more, that's not necessarily going to get in the way. That can actually lead into their awakening, as long as it's just not a complete flat line where they are just whiling away their life. Although it's understandable that people do that. I mean, everything's understandable because being a human being, being an ego, having an ego nature, it's not easy. I mean, life is not easy. Life is frightening if we really get down to it. We're all here, it's like that question. I'm not sure if I'll say it right. Why are we here? Where do we come from? Where are we going? As human beings, there's so much mystery, there's so much unknown, and this is why we sometimes, just hold to a simple religious practice or, vision or, just simple spiritual routines that are not truly deepening and seeking some raw and authentic truth underlying the surface of things. It's because sometimes we don't want that. It can be scary to actually dig in. I often say any journey of knowledge begins with ourself. Self-knowledge. That can be scary, to get to know ourselves. It's vital that we actually come to an authentic and raw place where we, are willing to see who we really are, and then to unfold that and grow and integrate the various aspects of ourself in an authentic way. But that can be scary. And so a lot of people, even with a spiritual practice or religious beliefs, are avoiding the real journey of awakening, the journey of spiritual consciousness. And so because this is the case, then whatever leads you toward an authentic self-knowledge and then a spiritual awakening, that is good. That's what you need. Whatever leads you there. And so it can look really like anything. It's just a matter of, are the things that you are doing, sort of segueing into a spiritual seeking. I think I've said this before in a video, but it's just vital to have that spark of desire to know. The mind can just cut itself off from that desire, but to have that desire is vital. What is after death? Is there something like a soul? Can I know myself in a deeper way? Can I know my soul? Can I glimpse what might come after this life? Can I live more authentically in this life? Are there things about myself that I haven't seen? Do I want to see them? Who am I, really? What is the fullness of myself? What is the fullness of reality? Wish to know this, even if it seems impossible. It's worth asking the questions. It's worth thinking about. It's worth moving toward some deeper awareness. It's worth it. It's easy to say we can't know. Do you really know that we can't know? And if you don't really know, I think it's worth, searching, seeking, asking questions, trying to get to know yourself, trying to get to know the essence, the deepest essence within you. If you do this, then you get to choose what your spiritual journey looks like. You know, you can I love fantasy. I write fantasy. I love fantasy movies. I love Star Wars, the original trilogy, and some of the other stuff. But I love the concept of it. You know, space adventures, fantasy lands. I'm a geek, you know. I love that stuff. I love model toys and, you know, some comics. And, you know, I'm also an NFL guy. I love watching sports, football in particular. This is good stuff. This is good stuff, you know. You can fit a spiritual journey into your unique self. The point is to be deepening your experience of self, to be broadening it, you know, to be awakening to all that you are. But that's the point. All of these other things can fit into that, you know. When I spoke of meditation, I talked about how we can have a spiritual experience, and then our ego conceptualizes it, and then in conceptualizing it, it freezes it and restricts it. So say someone, you know, does, someone, you know, does acid, or say they are in deep prayer or meditation, and they have this, you know, what some have called peak experiences. They have a real experience of, their spiritual nature. If afterward they create these set concepts around that, about what that means, what that can be, how that can come about, how it can't come about, that can limit their continuing forward in a journey of awakening. In a sense, in the negative sense, this is what religion has done with spiritual experience and vision, is that over vast amounts of time, it's created such set and settled concepts that those concepts have become prisons to truth, prisons of truth, prisons holding truth within very specific limits and ideas about what can and cannot be spiritual. As an individual, we should break free of this. Now, we can have our spiritual journey take place in the context of a religious tradition, but it doesn't have to. And it's often important to break away from things that have come before, whether that's culturally in terms of religious views, or individually in terms of like maybe what our parents taught us. Again, we don't have to. It really just depends on what will allow you to truly seek, to see yourself past shame or guilt or fear, what will allow you to actually authentically look at yourself, to seek your deepest, most essential self, and then to move forward toward a continued deepening and a slow shift in identification from shallow ego nature to that most essential self. And that can look like anything. It can. It's just important to begin to seek our deepest self, our soul, and to continue forward in deepening that spiritual identity.